In the heart of the night, when the world seems to sigh in silence and the stars they watch the earth like forgotten sentinels, Friar Gilson suddenly wakes up. It wasn't just any morning. It was April 24th, 2025. Outside, a blanket of fog covered the streets like a sacred veil, and the humidity from the air, it seemed whisper secrets that only a few could hear. The clock marked exactly 3 in the tomorrow. The hour of souls, they said, the ancient mystics. A custom that Friar Gilson had maintained throughout the years, awakening to pray for those who most needed light in his darkness. But this time, something was different. A deep concern fills him, shuddered he heart. It was not fear, but a kind of summons, as if a silent, loving voice was called beyond the veils of the time. He stood up, lit a candle, avoiding the coldness of the electric light, and knelt before his small, improvised altar. Closed the eyes, he took a deep breath, and in that sacred stillness, a clear thought emerged in his mind. Get ready. Something big is coming. The cold of the early morning seemed to intensify. The beating of his heart resonated in his ears like ancestral drums. He opened the eyes, and in the threshold of the door of his humble cell, he saw a shadow projected by the flickering light of the candle. A soft knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock. His soul, trained in the listen to what invisible, knew that one, the call was not accidental. He approached slowly. Each step on the wooden floor creaked, accompanying the compass of his shortness of breath. When opening the door, the scene was left recorded in his memory forever. A man, dressed soberly, held in his hands a parchment envelope thick, sealed with the imposing coat of arms of the Vatican. Its serene, almost ethereal face conveyed the feeling of being more of a messenger than a simple delivery man. "Friar Gilson?" he asked a stranger with a deep but kind voice. "The friar." He nodded, unable to articulate a word. The man extended the envelope with both hands, bowed the head in sign of respect, and, without saying nothing more, it was given average, turned around and disappeared into the mist, as if it had never happened would have been there. Gilson closed the door slowly, the envelope heavy between his trembling fingers. The red wax seal gleamed in the candlelight, and the Friar Gilson's heart was pounding his chest with a mixture of reverence and holy fear. I knew that envelope wasn't a simple message. I knew that night was not like the others. Respite deep, felt the weight of the history on his shoulders, and with a whisper that only he and God could hear, pronounced, "Thy will be done." And so, without know it still, Friar Gilson began one of the crossing's deepest spiritual experiences of his life. Friar Gilson held the envelope in his hands as if out a fragile locket. The seal from the Vatican, perfectly printed in red wax, seemed to pulse with a life of its own in the flickering candlelight. His mind was racing, but his heart remained in a reverent silence. What message class could require so much stealth? Why just now, when the world still cried the recent departure of His Your Holiness, Pope Francis? With careful fingers, he slid a small dagger ceremonial under the lapel of the about, breaking his seal with a slight creaking sound, resonated in the room like a thunder content. Inside, he found a handwritten letter in a fine parchment, scented with incense. The first words, calligraphed with solemnity, made his soul tremble. "To you, Friar Gilson, in whom my heart has entrusted the whispers of my spirit." The emotion it invaded. It wasn't an institutional communication. It was a personal letter. Every line seemed written not for a cleric, but for a brother in the faith, for a chosen soul. But there was more. A small, carefully protected video device accompanied the parchment. Beside it, a short note. "Look at this message only after praying with the heart open, not with the eyes of the judgment, but with the eyes of the soul." Friar Gilson closed the eyes and squeezed a parchment against his chest. The outside world disappeared. Only were left the hum of the candle and the heartbeat of your own heart, marking the compass of a night that had no return. I knew that once I looked at that video, his life would change forever. With a final prayer, asking strength and discernment, he addressed toward the old wooden table where I used to write his meditations nocturnal. With firm hands but a shaken soul, he pressed the play button. The screen came to life, illuminating the room with a soft, almost sacred light. And there, in the midst of the darkness, appeared the face of Francis. He was not the solemn pope of the public appearances. He was a man, old man, with tired but bright eyes, who smiled with the tenderness of a grandfather and the firmness of a prophet. Friar Gilson contained her breath. Something profound, something eternal, was about to be revealed. The image of Francis, projected in the small screen, it seemed alive, as if the time himself would have stopped to listen to him. The Pope settled down in his chair, his hands clasped with the same serenity with the one who hugs the cross in a moment of deep prayer. With a calm voice, full of years, pain and hope, he began, "If you are watching this, dear Friar Gilson, is because my day has arrived at its end on this earth, and because you have been chosen not for me, but by him who moves the hearts in silence." A knot formed in Gilson's throat. He wasn't prepared to hear goodbyes, especially from the one he so admired as a universal pastor. Francisco continued, his penetrating gaze piercing the screen. "We live times of great darkness and confusion. The faith of many has cooled, and love in so many hearts has become fragile like glass. You, son mine, you are called to be a beacon, not with your words, but with your gestures." The video, far from being a solemn speech, was a confession of faith, a spiritual testament. Francis spoke of perseverance, of crossing storms without losing the hope. He spoke of the resurrection as a living promise, not as an ancient myth. And then, like someone revealing a sacred secret, he said something that made Friar Gilson feel how her eyes filled with tears. "But there is one condition, and you must know it. This mission will not be yours until you have cried. Not tears of pain only, but tears of love, of compassion true for the world. Only who is wept for love of Christ may be worthy of carrying his light in times of darkness." The words, they hit Gilson's soul like waves against a cliff. It was not enough to obey. It was not enough, he acknowledged, neither the righteousness. It was necessary to love until the crying, suffering with those who suffer, feel in his own flesh wounds of a torn world. The video term with a final blessing, that the Holy Spirit sustain you when your forces falter. May Mary cover you under her mantle when the loneliness visits you. And never forget, you are small, and because of that, you will be great. The screen slowly turned off, leaving in the room a darkness charged with the sacred. Friar Gilson fell to his knees. Tears, at first timid, then uncontrollable, sprang from his eyes like a released spring. "I didn't cry out of fear, nor not even out of sadness. I cried out of love, for a love so great that words could not contain." At that moment, he understood that he had just accepted, without pronounce it, the call that would change his life and perhaps the lives of many others. There was born on a mission, and Friar Gilson, between whispers and sobs, whispered to heaven, "Here I am, Lord. Make me your instrument." The dawn found Friar Gilson still kneeling, with the golden light filtering through the threadbare curtains of his cell. I hadn't slept. I didn't want to sleep. I knew that every second of that tomorrow was an echo of the mission he had just accepted. The letter included specific instructions, your first proof. It had to be public, visible, and it had to be put in game his humility and his love for unit. The moment did not take long in arrive. Few days later, he was invited to participate in a live-streamed debate where religious leaders, journalists, and critics debated the future of the faith in modern times. The atmosphere was tense, crossed accusations, veiled reproaches. Every word was like a thrown dart, with lethal precision. Friar Gilson, dressed in his simple habit, sat down in silence. He did not seek applause or quick answers. Your mission was another. When he finally gave the word, silence fell like a heavy blanket over the room, respite deep. I felt the world's gaze on his shoulders, and then, without prior warning, without human logic, did something that no one I expected. He stood up, He took off his microphone. He approached the center of the scenery, and in front of the cameras, in front of the eyes of millions, he knelt, not to give up, not to ask for applause. He knelt as a sign of humility and reconciliation. "Sorry," he said, in a firm, calm voice that resonated in the room as a soft thunder. "Sorry for every time our church have failed in loving. Forgiveness for every wound caused in name of God. Forgiveness, because being truly Christian is to love more than to judge." A murmur toured the room. Some religious leaders came down the head, others let out unshed tears. Even among the most skeptical, something in the atmosphere changed, as if an old woman wound will begin to close slowly. There was no discussion. There was no refutations. Only a deep silence full of meaning. Social networks exploded. Clips of Friar Gilson kneeling went viral in matter of minutes. Thousands of comments, from both believers and non-believers, expressed admiration for that one act of disarming simplicity. "This is the kind of leaders the world needs," said one of the headlines of the tomorrow following. "A man who preaches with facts, not with words," wrote an influential columnist. But for Friar Gilson, there was no space for the pride. "I knew that was just the first test. A drop in the vast ocean of the mission that Francis gave him had entrusted." As he was leaving in silence of the event, with the simplicity of someone who does not seek to be applauded, his heart, he repeated the prayer that had been turned his breath. "Make me small, Lord, so that only your greatness may be seen." And in that simple but powerful gesture, the first seed of the transformation already had been planted. The mission was just beginning. The night after of the act of reconciliation, while the city slept under the shade of the stars, Friar Gilson returned to his cell. On his bed, as if an angel it had left there, he found a second envelope. This time the seal was different, a flowered cross, a symbol of renewal. Inside, a brief and direct note. "It has arrived a time of the second spring. It takes hope where the hopelessness are lying roots." Below the note, a map of Brazil, with a red circle marked on the northern region, Manaus. His heart beat with strength. Manaus, land that had suffered enormously during the pandemic, which had cried invisible tears in saturated hospitals and forgotten streets. Without wasting time, Friar Gilson understood that he had to act. The mission wasn't to wait, it was to move. During the days following, mobilized entire communities, not just Catholics. Also evangelicals, spiritists, Jews, atheists of good faith heart. Nobody was excluded. Charity, as Christ taught, has no borders. They were formed caravans of hope, trucks loaded with medicines, food, clothes, water, drinkable water, volunteer doctors, nurses offering not only physical healing, but a word of comfort. Priests and pastors praying together under a same improvised roof. Manaus, accustomed to oblivion, saw something that seemed miraculous arrived. An army of love, a river of mercy flowing in half of the pain. Friar Gilson was not looking for recognition. He was sleeping in his ground next to the sick. He carried boxes, hugged whoever I cried. I prayed with who I no longer had faith. And there, among the faces marked by the suffering, he experienced something that the great cathedrals could not offer, the true presence of Christ, alive in every gesture of compassion. An old man, taking his hand, said with a broken voice, "Brother, I was doing years that I didn't feel that God remembered us." And Friar Gilson, with tears in his eyes, he replied, "He never left. We, sometimes, forget how see it." The second spring was not just a metaphor. It was real. It was the blossom of the hope in lands where everything seemed dead. And in every recovered smile, in every bandaged wound, in every silent prayer raised to heaven, Friar Gilson felt that the Francis's mission was not a burden, but a gift that never ended in he, but he had to multiply in others. The seed had germinated. Winter of the soul began to give way. The second spring had started. The news of the caravans of hope led by Friar Gilson was not long in coming, in crossing borders. At first, it was a little local report. Images of trucks reaching isolated communities, volunteers hugging children who were laughing for the first time in weeks, but like a spark in a dry field, the story spread. Television networks nationals began to cover the phenomenon. Talk shows invited doctors, volunteers, beneficiaries of the help. Everyone repeated it same. It was not only material assistance, was a renaissance of the spirit. Social networks were vibrating. Videos of Friar Gilson helping to load boxes, smiling among the people, kneeling to pray next to sick elderly people, went viral. Spring of Hope became in global trend in a matter of days. People of different faiths, and even those who, they said they didn't have faith, they commented excitedly, "It doesn't matter, in that we create." What Friar Gilson is doing reminds us all, in that humanity we should believe. Editorials of the major newspapers wrote unexpected tributes. While the powerful argue, the humble change the world. A friar Brazilian teaches the planet the silent power of compassion, the magnitude of the motion. It was such that even political authorities, leaders of various religions and celebrities began to show support, sending donations, recording messages of encouragement. But for Friar Gilson, the measure of the success was not found in the headlines, nor in the applause. His thermometer was different. It was the look of that mother who, after receive a bag of food, simply squeezed her hand between tears of gratitude. It was the improvised song of children playing around a water well, potable newly installed. It was the sigh of hope that, like a soft wind, began to travel across a country lulled by the pain. Brazil, in their painful diversity, had united, although out for a moment, in an act of charity that transcended dogmas and differences. And the echo of that union did not stop within its borders. In places as far apart as the Philippines, Poland, and South Africa, communities inspired by following the example of Friar Gilson, they began to organize their own caravans of hope. A river of compassion, born from a sealed letter in the Vatican, was now flowing, uncontainable by the world. And everything was there started with a tear, true love. The sun rose over Manaus with a different light, as if the own heaven will silently celebrate the transformation that was brewing in the land. In his small makeshift cell inside one of the aid centers, Friar Gilson found the last message. It wasn't an envelope. There was no stamps, neither scrolls. It was a leaf, simple, handwritten, with the calligraphy unmistakable of Francis. Faith is not a monument. It is not something you visit and leave behind. Faith is a living river which must flow, renew itself, and fertilize everything it touches. Now, son Mai, don't look for big stages nor applause. Your mission is to inspire, make others become sources of hope. Be a silent sower. Gilson closed the eyes. The words of the Pope, full of eternal wisdom, resounded in his heart like a sacred echo. He understood then that You're the Road did not end with the caravans, nor with the applause, nor not even with the tears. His true. The challenge was to transform lives, not from the height of a pulpit, but from the proximity of a hug, of an anonymous gesture, of a life offered in silence. In the days following this, he dedicated himself to forming small groups of volunteers, men and women of all ages and creeds, sowing in they the seed of the compassion active. In every corner where a hand was extended to help another, Friar Gilson saw reflected the smile of Francisco, that shepherd who had trusted in the beyond of the time and of the death. The legacy was not his, it belonged to everyone. And so, like a river that never stops, the mission of hope was expanding, touching forgotten hearts, reviving sleeping dreams, lighting up the faith where everything seemed lost. At the end of each day, while the world continued its frenetic course, Friar Gilson found your peace in a simple prayer. Lord, let them not seek me, let them find you in my steps. And while he wind of the second spring continued blowing over Brazil and beyond, a message was left sown in every soul that had been touched. Faith, it is not imposed, it is contagious. Hope, It is not preached, it is lived. The mission isn't over, it's just beginning.